I'm Stephen Foskett, organizer of Tech Field Day and publisher of Gestalt IT. We are here on site in Las Vegas for Pure Accelerate, and I'm catching up with some of my friends from the industry, including Mr. Max Mortillaro. It's great to see you.
Hey, great to be here. Great to be in person.
Absolutely. It's it's so rare and so cool to have people get back together again. We are at events a lot. We attend a lot of things. We learn a lot of things. One of the topics that companies talk about all the time, including here at Pure Accelerate, is sustainability. It's one of those things that it just seems like a buzzword now. What does it really mean? What is sustainability?
So for me, sustainability is a subset of the E in ESG. So, environmental, social, corporate governance, where the E is environmental. So sustainability, we're looking at several things. We're looking at the way a company is sustainable in many areas. So it's not just the product that the company does, but it's also the way it conducts its operations, the way they source materials, transportation. There's many things. So the best way to understand that is to look at the EPA's website, where they have the scope of the GHG, sorry for that. So greenhouse gases emissions, if I get it right. And we have several scopes. So one of the scopes is what the company produces directly. The other scope is the energy consumption, and the other scope is part of what the waste they're producing and so on. And so that's for the company itself. But the company also sells you a product. And that product also has some kind of environmental efficiency characteristics in a way. So we're talking about, first of all, the energy that it's consuming, whether it is efficient or not. So you could have a system which is very, very fast, but which is not very efficient in terms of performance, right? Especially for big, large systems, which are mission critical application, for example. But again, if you need to run a mission critical application, then you have to make a kind of let's say, compromise in that aspect. On the other hand, you may have a system which is optimized for capacity, which is very dense. You get a lot of storage. It's very efficient from a power consumption perspective. So this is one of the aspects to that. The other aspect to that is how it's produced. Where is it produced? What kind of energy is used to produce it, right? So you could get a product which is very expensive because it's made in a country which is, let's say, in the Western Hemisphere, but which uses renewable sources of energy. Whereas you could have a system which is very cheap to produce, but it's made, for example, in China or somewhere else where they use coal energy. And there are many, many aspects to that. So I could go on and on.
So one of the things I want to get to quickly is you mentioned ESG. That is one of my personal touch points. Whenever companies talk about ESG, so often, especially IT companies, the only part they talk about is the E. They talk about ESG, 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 and then you read their ESG report and it's 8 pages of green leaves and children in Africa and no pages talking about their corporate governance, their social responsibility, etc. And that just drives me up a frickin' wall. Mm-hmm. But that being said, I think that there is a tremendous value to basically holding companies to account to be more sustainable because, it helps everyone. And it is wise to start thinking about the impacts of the decisions we're making on the environment. Unfortunately, it seems to me that there's a lot of greenwashing that goes on. And you mentioned sort of all of the different factors. Absolutely. I mean, you see companies making incredibly wasteful products and then focusing on, we planted trees, so we're sustainable, that kind of thing. How can we, I don't know, what should people be looking for?
Well, there are so many things to look for. So, I mean, as a buyer, one of the key things you want to know, I mean, especially for us in Europe, is you want to get a solution which is very energy efficient because energy prices were rising. We want to avoid that waste and so on. And again, I'm going to jump quickly offside to get back to the point. The thing is also, which is important when you talk about efficiency. So here we're talking about vendors, but you as a consumer, you also need to take into account your energy consumption as well. Are you sourcing that? So are you sourcing that from green renewable sources, or are you going with, whatever fossil fuels, for example? So if you put a lot of effort to select the best vendor with the best efficiency, and you put that in a data center which is using fossil fuels, then sorry, but you're doing it wrong, because you're kind of negating the effect of what you were trying to achieve. That's one of the aspects there. But what should you look for? There are things which may be, not really obvious, but which are, I think, count as well. So shipping devices has a cost. So if you ship it, via plane, whatever, the way it's delivered, there's an impact to that. There's an impact on how it's packaged. Are you using a lot of plastic? Are you using cardboard? There's the aspect of, maybe it's stupid, but bezels and plastic parts that you have in the element. So it's really lovely to see a nice rack, with a lot of bezels and LEDs and stuff like that. But is that really something that you need? These are kind of a bit maybe more frugal aspects of that. But if we are here to talk about technology, and I guess we're here to talk about technology, well, you're looking to have an optimized architecture, right? So you want to make sure that you get the best out of your money, the best storage efficiency, the best density. So you're looking at parameters such as, I would say, watt per gigabyte or watt per terabyte. There's no real standard, but you're looking at getting the most capacity at the least possible amount of watts, right?
Yeah. Another thing I want to bring up in terms of sustainability as well is that the most efficiency is sometimes paradoxically not the most efficient system inherently, because if you can continue using something longer and they don't have to make another one, if you can reuse components of the system, then it's much, much more beneficial. People like to joke about this, but it's true. Continuing to drive your old, giant SUV is in many cases more sustainable than buying a brand new efficient car if otherwise the choice is to junk it and to basically buy a new thing. And that's the same in enterprise tech. I think that too often companies have basically written off assets after like 3 years and just sort of, well, we're done with that, we're going to move on to the next big thing. Or I think vendors have positioned it that people are doing that. And similarly, I think vendors often position a complete greenfield wipe of the environment in order to justify the sustainability claims that they're making. Oh, if you have no more previous generation devices and you put all the next generation in, you're going to save 40%. Sure, but is that realistic?
No, absolutely. You want to ideally adopt a solution which is producing the least e-waste as possible. So you need to think about interoperability of component, the ability of doing in-place upgrades, refreshes, and so on. So some in the industry have started doing that early. For example, Pure Storage is one of the cases. It looks like some of the other vendors, their competition is somehow slowly coming to that as well, at least with some of their products. So that's really important. And you can think about, do I need, even if you don't have a platform which allows this kind of in-place upgrades, you have to think about, what do I do? Do I need to refresh it just because we've hit the 5-year mark? Shouldn't I be maybe sweetening the assets, prolong the lifetime of it? And there comes interesting questions. Most of the time, the reason why some customers want to refresh is because the costs of support are getting prohibitive past the 5th year. And the question there is about, what do I do with that? Am I going to pay for these exorbitant, prices, or am I going to risk it? At some point you need to look at what data is placed on which arrays, and perhaps, you can use those as if you have a good data protection policy strategy in place, maybe you can afford to run out of support. Sorry if I'm saying something which is, a risk. There's a risk, there's always a risk, right? And you need to look at the risk versus the benefit and make that decision for yourself in the end. But I totally agree with you on the fact that you should always look at a solution which allows you to, prolong the lifetime of the asset, definitely.
So to wrap up then, I want to put you on the spot here, and I want to ask you, what is the oldest piece of tech equipment that you personally use on a regular basis?
the oldest piece of hardware I'm still regularly using. So do cameras come into play?
Oh, I don't know. Let's stick with computers. Let's stick with computers.
Okay, I think I don't use it regularly still. I used to have a TRS 80 model 100, and when I had it, I was firing it up regularly, but I cannot find it anymore. So that's probably the oldest piece of hardware I have.
So for me, I am, yes, a clicky keyboard aficionado, and I still absolutely regularly use a 1987 IBM Model M keyboard. and I recently realized that my Macintosh is plugged in with the original cable that came with that Macintosh as well, the power cable. So, I guess, does a power cable count? I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
Well, thank you so much. It's cool
Thanks.
to talk with you about this. Before we go, where can people connect with you and continue this conversation?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me on LinkedIn at Massimiliano Mortillaro, or you can find me maybe as Max Mortillaro as well. Otherwise, on the Tech Unplugged blog, so techunplugged.io/blog.
Thanks a lot for joining us for this Gestalt IT Tech Talk. It's great to catch up with you here in person, and I look forward to seeing you more.
Me too. Thank you very much.